granniopteryx, granniopteryx. She knows the truth, she's linking every link.
Hello, this here is the Lord Walney's report on the way the Iranian regime has wiggled itself into all sorts of layers of British society, and specifically using charities as the way in. I'm not going to read the whole thing. It's 87, well, it's longer than that. It's 87 pages long in writing, and then right at the end there are some nice pictures of propaganda put out by the various charities. So sorry if here we are, 87 pages. Right. Now, we don't know how much these charities, well, we don't know how much these charities are going to have any power or influence as the Iranian regime degrades, but it could survive, and those charities are still there. But it's not just them. Whatever Walney is saying about the Iranian charities, you could probably apply to any other, specifically Muslim charities. There may be others, but things like the Muslim Brotherhood will have charities as well that use exactly the same tricks. So when I'm talking about Iran, remember it's not just Iran. So anyway, yeah, I read this so you don't have to. And the main point of it is that the Iranian regime has set up charities that systematically exploit our charity laws and practices. Walney refers to them as a soft power network to export Khomeinist revolutionary ideology. And it also, well, they use anti-Semitism, or rather, maybe we should say they exploit anti-Semitism, because it's a very well-tested way of destroying a country. When you're focusing on some particular area of hate. And in Europe, it's the Jews that usually end up as the focus. But it's not only the Jews in that sort of firing line. Iranian dissidents get a fair amount of negative attention as well, don't they? Anyone who's seen how Nihat Ghobani gets pushed around by, well, and insulted by block-headed white Europeans who have conflated Iranian dissidents with Jews. You'll see the same methods in operation. Right, here, that's it. It says here, charities can provide platforms for engagement with the public, parliamentarians, universities, local authorities and international bodies. A former independent reviewer of terrorism legislation has described such activity, when undertaken by hostile states, as capable of constituting a form of espionage. So the Walney Report does point out the various ways Iranian-based charities work to influence public opinion and conduct espionage operations, all under the cover of legal and apparently legitimate charity work, which, as with all charities, has access to all of these bodies listed here. They also get tax benefits, by the way. Now, we do have various offices that are supposed to control the behaviour of charities. The main one is the Charity Commission. But none of these organisations is set up for dealing with cheats like the Iranian government. That is, the Charity Commission looks for flouting of rules generally, and usually to do with finances. If the charity seems to be sticking to the financial rules, then the Charity Commission, well, they're not empowered to do much. Also, and I suspect this is the greater part of the problem, they probably don't want to do too much digging. Rocking the boat is something they'd shy away from. And it's something, I'll probably get to that towards the end of his report. Walney mentions what he calls, what he called it was cultural hesitancy. That is the wish not to be considered Islamophobic. So the Charity Commission ends up being too slow, too opaque, and it concentrates too heavily on tick box assessments, as I say, usually to do with finances. In other words, it isn't equipped to counter what the Walney study refers to as a hybrid threat. Look, it was set up to deal with people and organisations who broadly understand the rules of social cohesion and stick to them without actually thinking there's any other way of doing things. But the Iranians don't stick to those ideas. They don't have the general interests of British society at heart, which, generally speaking, a British-based charity would have. What the Charity Commission aren't prepared for are organisations which, well, what happens with many of the Iranian organisations, for instance, when their personnel are caught in some sort of cheating, they just change the personnel and carry on doing the same things because they're all getting their orders from a central source in Iran, one way or another. So it says here, established as grassroots Shia religious institutions, cultural centres and human rights or educational charities, there are as many as 30 different organisations operating in the UK with alleged links to the Iranian regime. And it says here the report focuses on 10 charities, and they're all under suspicion of various failures, mostly to do with governance, extremism, or direct links to the Iranian regime. 4 of the 10 that the Walney Report focuses on are recipients of a tax relief scheme called Gift Aid that allows charities and amateur sports clubs, things like that, to get a 25 pence tax rebate for every £1 donated. And some have also directly received public funds and grants. That is, the UK government, that is, you and me, those of you and me who are British taxpayers, we are actually funding organisations whose entire purpose is to destroy the United Kingdom. Walner traces some of these links straight to the Supreme Leader's office or to the Qom Seminary. That's an enormous Shia Islam theological college in Iran, and also to the Al-Mustafa International University, which appears to be the usual recruiting centre for the notorious Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, which basically is the military regime that is it's running Iran, really. A lot of speculation is that the Supreme Leader is just a puppet of the IRGC. And also the links go back to the Quds Force, which is the IRGC Secret Service. The main charity is the Islamic Centre of England. Now, I have a link to that, I think. So, the Islamic Centre of England was founded in 1995 and its governing document previously required that one trustee must be appointed by the Supreme Leader of Iran. It makes no secret of representing Iran's Supreme Leader, and the other charities often refer to it as the headquarters. After Soleimani was assassinated, it held a series of events in his honour, and the other charities did the same thing. ICEL has also made videos aimed at children, pushing the Shia view of a glorious Armageddon, as well as hero worshipping of various Shia leaders. Of course, this study predates the mayhem inflicted on the Iranian leadership by the Israelis and the Americans. So I can't speak for what particular cardboard cutout they're saluting now. But to get back to the charities, most of them have some connection with organising or participating in anti-Israel rallies, and anyone who thinks it's just Israel they're getting at isn't reading the room. It's basically anti-West, and it's being allowed to continue by British offices which are supposed to be controlling such treacherous messages. And this might be because behind the scenes, all of these charities conduct intensive lobbying of political and governmental institutions, to the extent that, as I said, Walney quoted others as describing it as a form of espionage. Now, I did mention that the Islamic Centre of England had a clause requiring that one of the trustees would be appointed by Iran's supreme leader. Well, when the Charity Commission noticed that in 2023, the clause, they raised an objection and the clause was removed. And in that we have the whole problem. The Charity Commission were happy when the clause was removed, and that made everything right. But the fact is, the clause will be there anyway, even if it's not actually written down. So anyway, I did make a list of all the 4 main charities, but I can't go through all of them. It'd take too long. And anyway, you don't need a detailed breakdown. You can have a look at this document if you want. It would be sufficient to say that according to MI5, all of them have been implicated one way or the other in over 20 plots, both within the UK and beyond. And of course, by beyond, I mean it's not just the UK. Such organisations as these exist in other European countries, but for instance, Germany and Switzerland have more efficient alarms and stricter sanctions. Here we are. So, in 2024, German authorities closed the Islamic Centre of Hamburg and deported its head imam, who was a personal appointee of the supreme leader. Explaining the closure, Germany's interior minister said the institution was responsible for spreading an Islamist totalitarian ideology in Germany against human dignity, against women's rights, and against an independent judiciary, and against our democratic state. And there you have it, against the West, in other words. So that's Germany dealing with it, but we don't deal with it in the same way. It's not the state, it's the Charity Commission that is supposed to deal with this sort of thing. And as I said, it has very limited powers and very inefficient oversight. So it focuses on the obvious sins that charities have fallen into, such as financial compliance, and it just ignores the extremist ideology and foreign influence that the Germans caught. Another problem is that the Home Office, the police and the intelligence services, for very honourable reasons, by the way, don't share too much information. The Charity Commission often struggles to access classified information from the Home Office or other partners, that is, offices like MI5, forcing reliance on public sources. So if the Charity Commission wants to know what a charity is doing, it just has to go on the internet like you or me and type in questions. But if there's some hanky-panky going on behind the scenes, they're not going to find out about it because MI5 has that, and it will be classified. And between themselves, the Home Office and MI5, or even if the Charity Commission catches something that they haven't caught, they're not telling each other. So what's known to one isn't known to another. And then there's the issue of what Walney calls cultural hesitancy, which I mentioned before. He put that towards the end of his report, but I suspect that has to do with his own cultural hesitancy, because it wouldn't surprise me if that wasn't the whole cause of the problem. The people in the Charity Commission not wishing to, show what they think might be interpreted as Islamophobia, and the various departments of the government not wanting to show what might be termed Islamophobia, all the way up to the politicians who might speak out on this. The best part about the House of Lords is that when you're a Lord, generally you're there. You can say more or less what you want, and you might be pilloried, but you can't be removed. So the fear of being called Islamophobic is not something that's too much of a problem for Lord Walney. And yet his reference to cultural hesitancy comes right at the end of the report. And of course, this cultural hesitancy isn't going to be helped by the government's latest pronouncements on anti-Muslim hostility. So, in short, do I have any more links here? Right, no. Lord Walney argues that the UK charity system has been gamed by Iran, and all the charities are being used as an ideological beachhead, and without major changes to regulations and information, such as the Charity Commission having powers to deal with extremism, as well as finances and cross-agency intelligence sharing, the problem will persist. Now, we might hope for some changes impelled by the upheaval in Iran, but that's not the point. If the Iranian direction of Muslim imperial ambitions are stymied by the collapse of the Iranian regime, there will be other Muslim organisations willing to take up the baton and run with it. Of that you can be absolutely certain. So whatever Walney has applied to our government offices with regard to Iranian charities should be applied to other Muslim charities wherever they're based. And I'm not too sure that the government would have the strength to do that, probably because of cultural hesitancy. Anyway, that's my take on the Walney Report. I hope that gave you some useful information. All right, till next time. You can help my channel by subscribing and clicking the notification bell. That's quite important. And by sharing if you're so inclined. Links to my other channels and to donation methods are in the description. But the best way you can help is simply by clicking like and notify. Thank you.